A deep crack split the sea apart, causing the water to surge downward into the abyss. Seconds later, a figure slowly descended into the cascading waves, his polished black boots barely making a ripple. It was none other than Lu Shang. He carried a large sack filled with energy crystals over his shoulder. His eyes gleamed with excitement, and a satisfied smile formed on his lips. With minimal effort, he had gathered over 100 kilograms of energy crystals. The sheer abundance of resources on this planet was beyond his expectations. His gaze shifted downward, and his smirk deepened. It was time to move on to the next stage of his plan. Reaching out, he unleashed his mental energy. Gradually, a vast invisible net spread across the entire island, reaching even its most concealed corners. As Lu Shang observed the expanding web, his expression shifted to one of surprise. The moment he absorbed the energy crystals, his perception had undergone a tremendous change. His vision became sharper, and his reflection now appeared as a glowing amethyst figure. His mental power had skyrocketed, and although he wasn't completely certain if he had stepped into level 9, he knew without a doubt that he had far surpassed level 8 in both quantity and quality. He was no longer the same as before. Meanwhile, on another part of the island, surrounded by palm trees and patches of grass, a group of people moved calmly, each carrying sacks of energy crystals. A man, cigarette in hand, crouched down and turned to the woman beside him, his expression curious. "How much did you collect?" he asked. The woman placed her sack on the ground, reaching in to inspect its contents. A slight smile formed on her lips as she replied, "Not much, just a little over 100 grams. Behind her, the rest of the team stood clad in sharp suits. A long-haired young man, gripping his own bag, placed a hand over his chest, his gaze sincere. "I barely reached 100 grams, he admitted. Another man, holding his sack tightly, shifted his attention to the captain. His expression serious, he reported, "I managed to collect more than 300 grams. The woman raised her head, her eyes locking onto their leader. With curiosity, she asked, "What about you?" Taking the cigarette from his lips, the captain grinned. "Over 300 grams, he answered. He went on to explain that during the previous competition, their team had only managed to collect around 2 to 3 kilograms of energy crystals. This time, however, they had already surpassed that. Standing up, he clenched his fist, excitement flashing in his eyes. "We still have time," he declared. Extending his arm outward, he added with a confident smirk, "If we're lucky and manage to steal some from the others, we might even surpass 5 kilograms. Hearing this, the team's excitement grew. Their fists tightened, and smiles stretched across their faces. "We're definitely going to win," they whispered among themselves, their confidence soaring. The woman, however, remained thoughtful. Glancing at the others, she hesitated before asking, "But what if someone steals from us?" Her question was met with laughter. One of the men turned to her, extending his hand in reassurance. "That's not going to happen," he stated with certainty. "In Minju Tang, we stick together, and with Xing Yukong leading us, no one would dare try." Despite his confidence, the woman's expression remained uneasy. A hint of doubt flickered in her eyes. "But someone already has." A sudden shift in the air sent a shiver through the group. Instinctively, they turned around only to be left speechless. Their eyes widened in shock. Their jaws slackened in disbelief. Confusion filled their faces. Standing behind them was a lone figure, effortlessly balancing a large sack of energy crystals over his shoulder. Lu Shang. His gaze was filled with unwavering confidence, and a small smirk tugged at his lips. Recognition dawned on them, and fear quickly followed. Lu Shang, one of Harold's subordinates. The group instinctively stepped back as the reality of the situation sank in. Xing Yukong, however, remained calm. Crossing his arms, he let out a quiet sigh before taking a step forward. His gaze locked onto Liu Shang as he studied him carefully. "You sure seem confident," he remarked. Lowering his eyes briefly, Xing Yukong cracked his knuckles. Then, lifting his head again, he smirked. Let's see if you can back it up. Instantly, the air between them grew tense, the pressure building as both sides silently sized each other up. However, Lu Shang just smiled and replied, well, just a little, I suppose. In the next moment, he disappeared. Before you knew it, he was already behind the dude. The guy barely had time to register what had happened before a searing pain tore through his body. His eyes widened in shock as his clothes shredded from the sheer force of the impact. Then, with a dull thud, he collapsed. A sharp gasp spread through the crowd. No one knew what the hell just happened. Yet their senior brother seemed to just got one-shotted. Wai Yu instinctively turned towards him, that look in his eyes. She was sure she had seen it before. It was the same chilling gaze from that very night. A shiver ran down her spine, and she wondered, could it be him? However, she shook off the thought immediately, unwilling to believe it. Meanwhile, Lu Shang casually took the energy crystals before vanishing into the distance. 10 minutes later, an enormous splash of water crashed down, drenching everyone caught in its path. They all looked up. There, someone was hovering in midair with a massive bag slung over his back. He demanded that they hand over the crystals. Fear gripped the group instantly. Their leader didn't even hesitate before dumping every last crystal they had gathered. Lu Sheng weighed the haul, which was around 1 kilogram. With a satisfied nod, he let them go. They wasted no time fleeing, grateful to be spared. But as they ran, their minds reeled at what they had just witnessed. Just moments ago, they saw a whole squad made up of all great grandmasters get their asses whooped. Now, in its place was a gaping crater, as if the entire area had been evaporated. By now, they didn't even care about the tournament, they just wanted to get the hell out of this place. Meanwhile, for Liu Sheng, hunting down opponents one by one was far too inefficient. He needed a better approach. Then an idea struck. Why chase them when he could make them come to him? A plan already forming in his mind, he raised his hand and all of the energy crystals floated into the air, slowly pressing together, merging into a single massive crystal. But this wasn't enough, so he decided to add some flair. With a snap of his fingers, a wave of energy exploded outward. A beacon so potent, it was impossible to ignore. A grin tugged at his lips as he whistled, already looking forward to what was coming next. After this, the story shifts to Thousand Saint Island, where every step of the people was being monitored through drones. And in this, we see Fiona, who screams and says, "Why can't I see that man's picture? Keep changing it until I find him." After changing the picture again and again, finally, the image of Liu Sheng appears on the screen. Seeing this, Fiona becomes very happy and asks to stop the picture right there. After seeing Fiona like this, the people around start talking among themselves. It seems as if this pearl of the world cares a lot about the handsome boy with the ring mark. Other people present in the room also start whispering that it seems that it is beyond his capacity to surpass Lord Cumberland's level. And in the midst of this Cumberland also stands who, seeing all the people suddenly going to one side, asks others that what happened suddenly in this map. Why are all the people gathering at one place? Everyone quickly looks at the map on the screen where they can detect that all the people present in the competition are gathering at one place. Everyone was surprised to see this. Even Cumberland was unable to understand what was going on there. However, I think we should rewind a bit. The martial saints had gathered, their eyes fixed on the massive screen. All attention shifted to Tan Jiongyi as someone pointed out one of his top disciples, someone who had ranked in the top 10 of the last tournament. Tan Jiongyi stroked his beard, looking rather pleased by the compliments. Lin Jiongyi, watching the screen, remembered the guy from a decade ago. Back then, he had been slightly weaker than Tang Jai, but his talent and instincts were exceptional. However, right now, Tang Jai might not even stand a chance against him. That revelation caught Wanwan off guard. Tang Jai was their school's top disciple, a great grandmaster nearing 100 years old, and also one of the strongest out there. And yet, her mother had just said this disciple of Tan Jiangyi had surpassed him. She leaned in, asking if that was really true. Her mother nodded, saying the person not only was Tan Jiangyi's favorite. She wouldn't even be surprised if he broke into the 9th level in the near future. By now, the screen showed the two sides on the verge of clashing, but she wasn't optimistic about our boy. In fact, she outright believed that our boy was about to suffer a crushing defeat. Standing alone against the overwhelming forces of Ming Yutong wasn't the smartest move, so she thought. But then Wanwan tapped her mother's shoulder and pointed at the screen. The next moment, the person she spoke so highly of just got his ass kicked in mere seconds. Wanwan then asked her if that was the guy she said was stronger than Tang Jai. The one who might break into the 9th level? Things got a bit awkward. Then, with a serious expression, she admitted her mistake, saying our boy wasn't just someone strong, he was on a whole different level. The other martial saints exchanged glances, all couldn't believe their eyes. An 8th level this powerful was almost unheard of. And then Lu Shang did something that made them all pause. He took out every last energy crystal he had and piled them together, forming a massive energy crystal instead. The sheer concentration of energy was impossible to ignore. It wasn't just the competitors who took notice. Cumberland himself was visibly intrigued as well, and he wondered what this kid was planning. It didn't take long for the martial saints to piece it together. Our boy wasn't just here to win. He wanted to draw every single person to him. Perhaps he was declaring himself the sole ruler of this tournament. Across the room, Fiona's eyes locked onto him. Turning to her father, she made it clear, saying this man was the one she had been waiting for, the partner she had always dreamed of. As expected, contestants rushed over, all drawn by the massive energy crystal. One of them demanded to know how Lu Shang had gotten his hands on so many energy crystals. Meanwhile, an out-of-shape, perhaps unemployed Yen prince from a parallel world who had never spent a day training recognized our boy, saying he was the one who had caught Fiona's interest. One by one, people swiftly surrounded Lu Shang. Their eyes locked onto the massive energy crystal floating above him. And it didn't take long for them to realize this was no coincidence. They were all lured here on purpose. Scanning the crowd, Lu Shang quickly identified people from the Transcendent Martial School, the military, and other factions he wasn't familiar with. However, at least they are all here. Someone stepped forward, smirking as if he already had the upper hand. With an arrogant tone, he tells Lu Shang that he had guts. But if he knew what was good for him, he'd hand over the energy crystals. Out of respect for Lady Fiona, they might even let him walk away in one piece. Lu Shang didn't respond. He simply stared at the man as if he were an idiot. Somewhere among the crowd, once again, the Vegeta from Temu, or we got Vegeta at home, or whatever you want to call him, was also getting restless. He had no idea where all these energy crystals had come from. But since our boy was outnumbered, he tells him it's too late for regrets now. Meanwhile, the military marshals found the situation quite odd. Even they wouldn't dare stand alone against such a gathering. So why was the person so confident? Before they know what's going on, they decide to stay put. Then, without warning, Lu Shang raised his hand. A pulse of energy erupted, shattering the massive energy crystal above. The sky was instantly filled with countless shards. His lips curled into a devilish grin. Challenge me, defeat me, kill me. Then every last piece of energy crystal is yours. Those words ignited a wildfire of greed. Instantly, two people lunged forward. Who they were didn't really matter, because our boy didn't even need to move, as his psychic energy alone was enough to send them flying. Dong Shengyi's eyes widened in shock. Those two were ranked in the top 5 last tournament, and they were swatted away like insects. A chill ran down his spine as he immediately signaled for his people to fall back. But it was too late. Lu Shang lifted his hand again. A terrifying surge of energy gathered in his palm before he casually swung it forward. A shock wave rippled through the battlefield, sending people charging at him reeling. Some coughed up blood on impact, others simply went unconscious. But of course, he took it easy on them. Dong Shengyi stood frozen. If he hadn't been cautious, he wouldn't have dodged that attack in time. And now, as he looked at his surroundings, he quickly realized this wasn't the reckless act of a madman. This was a trap from the very start. Tang Jai struggled to his feet, his body trembling from the force of the attack. He tried his best to stand up while telling Dong Shengyi he needed to run. The person was way too powerful. Lu Shang merely chuckled before unleashing his psychic energy once again. In the next moment, the sea beneath them surged upward, forming a towering wall of water. Everyone was left stunned. This wasn't just impressive. It was something even martial saints might not be capable of. Tang Jai yelled for everyone to run. But before he knows it, Lu Shang had vanished from sight, only to reappear behind Tang Jai like the greatest villain ever. A cold smirk played across his lips as he leaned in, telling him that since they came all this way, might as well pay a toll before they can leave. Just as Dong Shengyi was about to save his senior brother, Tang Jai made his choice. Summoning the last of his strength, he shouted at Dong Shengyi to run and he'd buy him time. Lu Sheng's hand landed lightly on Tang Jai's head and he questioned who exactly gave him that confidence.